Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Wednesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It is the 29th of March, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date on your local weather information. Now, if you're on the Gulf Coast today or around the Alaska Peninsula, you probably heard or received a tsunami alert message test during the day. It was about 10:15 or so, and we'd like to know how that went for you. You can let us know by going to ready.alaska.gov and fill out the very brief survey there. Now, you're wondering who these fine people are. That is new friend Pam, a new forecaster at the Anchorage National Weather Service office, and Dave Kochevar there working on the tsunami system there. As soon as we receive the alert, it jumps into our system, says, hey, you guys got a tsunami, spread the message out across the important parts of Alaska. And my friends on the right there, Tom and Nicole, are doing the same thing in Juneau, covering southeastern Alaska today. So the Anchorage office was looking at south central and southwest, all the way out to the Aleutian Chain. And our friends in Juneau were watching the southeastern panhandle. All of this system works together to let you know as fast as possible that a tsunami could be coming to your part of Alaska on the coast. Now, if you're in the interior, up in the north or in the west, tsunamis are not an issue for your part of Alaska, so you wouldn't have heard about this test. But if you did get that message today, whether you heard it on a NOAA weather radio, your Marine band, or you saw it online, or some other method, TV or radio, please do let us know. That makes sure that we are getting that message to the people that need it most, you on the coastline there. And so that test and that survey, very important every year. This is an annual thing, and we hope to do it better every year. So please let us know. Ready.alaska.gov is a place to go to let us know how that went for you today in your part of Alaska. So thank you very much in advance for doing that for me and everybody else. Here's a look at how things are shaping up across the interior this afternoon and this evening. A winter weather advisory is in effect for the Yukon Flats, and the upper Yukon Valley all the way out toward Bettles, and the central interior down toward Tanana. Expecting several inches of snow. Could see a good solid 5 inches out of this. This is the same system that's been moving north out of south central, and now it's going to focus on your community as it moves up against the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range. This will go into tomorrow morning, so a winter weather advisory is posted for you right now. And again, snow is coming, and snow will be falling and should continue into the overnight and early morning hours. Here's a look at that on the satellite picture. Notice low pressure here across the northern Gulf is kind of working its way and then kind of snaking up its way across the Alaska Range. It's holding together. It's not going to be quite as strong as it once was, but it still has enough moisture and enough lift and enough cold air to produce more snow, not only over south central where it's still snowing, but also up across the interior. And that trend will continue as we head toward the end of the week. Something to keep watch on too is moisture moving into southeastern Alaska. We've seen pockets of rainfall today for places like Juneau and all the way down the inner channels. As we go into the next several days, if you're in southeast, you're going to want to watch this weather system here. This one's just coming into our view with low pressure working northward. It's also going to squeeze a lot of the air across the northern and western Gulf Coast. So while things aren't too terribly windy right now with this weather moving through, the winds are going to pick up all the way from the eastern Aleutians, the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak, south central, and eventually into southeastern Alaska. So things are changing as we get into a considerably more active weather pattern than we've been in for quite a while. Low pressure across the northern Gulf right now is one of the main story makers, but if you look up to the Chukchi Sea, you can see that northerly wind still having an impact across some of our northernmost communities. So it is still cold, and it is still pushing that ice edge down towards St. Paul and St. George. And if you stick with me for a few minutes, we're going to get to the ice map that we always like to update and share with you. You might be surprised about how close that ice edge is to St. Paul. Chances are, if you're in St. Paul, maybe even around St. George, you're seeing some of those ice strips moving off that main ice pack already today, and that trend could also continue. Out around Norton Sound, looks like that generally dry, clear sky. You've seen some clouds today from time to time, but it looks like most of the really active weather is out toward your east with that southerly flow that's pumping snow back into the interior and the north slope. Here's a look at the surface map. The storm system that brought snow to south central is on the move now northward. There's another surge here just to the south. That's feeding in moisture, but it doesn't look like it's going to be the main player anymore. Out across southeast, waves of rain also working ashore there, but it doesn't look to be as widespread as the snow that's falling across some parts of the interior and south central now. But we did see some snow starting up in kind of one of these troughs that stretch out across the northwestern sections of our state today, all the way from Bettles to Ambler, out toward Kotzebue, Point Lay, Point Hope, all the way up to Wainwright, in fact, and then things were a little bit quieter as you head eastward down the Beaufort Seacoast. Here's a look at the weather pattern tonight. Low pressure to our south will take center stage suddenly with an occlusion working northward into the western Gulf. Notice again how those lines of constant pressure, these are isobars, as they get squeezed together, that means that air has to flow a whole lot faster to equalize itself between low pressure, the vacuum here, and high pressure, the air pump pushing toward that low pressure vacuum. So a lot of air is rushing around this great big vacuum here. As that system is moving northward, it's going to be squeezed on top of that across some of the higher terrain, across the Chugach and the Kenai Mountains. And as that happens, that usually produces a warmer weather experience for many involved on the lee side of the mountain. So anything along Cook Inlet up toward Anchorage and times in the valley. So we'll see that start up as we head into the late night hours tonight, much more so tomorrow during the day and into the afternoon and evening Thursday night. For southeast, that moisture will get kind of resupplied here, so you get a little bit of a break as we head into late tonight and early tomorrow morning, and then probably another surge as we go. Snow is going to continue north of the Yukon Valley as well, so probably skipping over the Fairbanks area a little bit and then back into snow as you head northward and westward toward Tanana and up toward Bettles and the Yukon Flats, including Fort Yukon itself. Expect snow totals there on the order of 5 inches, maybe some more in some isolated areas. And on the northern and higher terrain side of southeast, the snow showers and rain showers will start to pick up once again. So here's that break I was talking about for Thursday. And then as this gets closer, the winds are going to come up and the rain should start to move back in fairly quickly. Now it looks like the greatest risk for any convection being upward moving weather that could produce towering cumulus clouds or even thunderstorms, that's probably going to stay down to the south right now. So unless this really jumps up a little bit further north, better chance for thunderstorms, or at least any brief thunder lightning activity, will be a little bit closer to the Pacific Northwest. But if you're moving out over the open ocean here, that is going to probably rattle your boat just a little bit. Out across the Alaska Peninsula, periods of rain and snow will be likely. Now, a lot of this will be meeting up with cold air, so any air that's working its way off of southwest toward the Alaska Peninsula and the chain should be cold enough to support snow. It may go back and forth at times, but this is certainly the colder part of the storm, and it is going to be a windy part of the storm as well. So any snow on the ground across the west coast will be capable of blowing around there. So we put the blowing snow symbol here. That's the crossed arrows. That's supposed to tell us that watch out, visibility might suffer just a little bit. As we get into Friday, notice there's still snow up north, but that threat is shrinking as we get across the north slope. Still some spotty snow showers around the northern side of the storm, but this is going to be a drier push now moving across the Alaska Range, so things should improve there. But now the front's across southeast, so watch for some stiff winds here up and down the Panhandle, and watch for rain changing to snow at times. With this boundary moving in, it should get warmer. However, this may slow down as it moves into some of that higher terrain, and as those boundaries kind of do, they take on a life of their own and do what they want once they get pushed up against a wall of rock like that in the mountains across southeast. Out across the west, low pressure's down to 974 millibars, so things will be drying out across the Gulf, but there will be some intense pushes of moisture here across south central and southwest. Not to mention some pretty wet snow up in the mountains. Whether you're in southeast, south central, or southwestern Alaska, you're going to want to keep an eye on the avalanche conditions there. And you know the terrain I'm talking about. You like to go there and have some fun, or just kind of explore a little bit. Just be careful when you're heading out in south central and southeast, as the amount of snow will be changing, especially on top of old snow going forward. So conditions will be changing in your favorite spots. Across southeast, temps today by and large were in the lower to mid 40s. Juneau made it up to 43, mid 40s for Ketchikan, Annette, Craig, and Klawock. Some mild temps there in Hyder as well. 40 in Cordova, 36 around Valdez, right at freezing in Anchorage today, 32 in Homer, 36 for Middleton Island. Golcana was 42. Up around Tok and around the Alcan border, the crossing itself, nearly 50 degrees as wind was coming up and over the mountains, and then back to 19 in Fairbanks, but even that was a big warm-up. 39 around Eagle today, 27 in Fort Yukon, 10 for AKwx Pass, and then crashing back to 13 below around Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse, 4 below for Kaktovik. Just a hair warmer in Barrow today, Atkasuk 6 below. Kotzebue Sound temperatures at 0 or better for Kivalina. As you get down toward Nome, 3 above. It was 12 above in Unalakleet, 23 in Galena. Bethel had 6, Nunivak Island 15, Ammonik was 7, 13 for Savunga. At around McGrath, 24 mild degrees. Lake Iliamna in the mid-20s. Low 30s for the Alaska Peninsula, all the way from Port Heiden to Cape Sarichef, and 34 for Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, 20s for St. Paul and St. George, and upper 30s for Adak, Atka, and Shemya, all showing 37 in fact. Overnight lows will stay milder from Kodiak Island all the way up to Fort Yukon. Of course, mild at 7 degrees is relative if you've been well below 0 this winter. 30s for most of southeast as well as the Alaska Peninsula and the chain. The west coast sub-zero though, anywhere really west of Bethel and McGrath. Looking at temps from 0 to 15 below in Kotzebue Sound, the north slope down to 12 below around Barrow. High temps tomorrow back up to 0. Most of the Yukon Valley will be back in the 20s, all the way from the YK Delta to the Alcan border. South of the Alaska range, you're probably going to get back into the 30s, even freezing or above for Fairbanks, so that's important. 41 in Kodiak, upper 30s for the Alaska Peninsula. Southeast, mid to upper 40s, and warming up with more wind coming your way. IFR conditions going to take over the interior and southwest tomorrow, as well as the Brooks Range in the morning. Low pressure pushing more clouds towards Sand Point. You can see IFR conditions there, as well as areas around the Chilkoot and Skagway region there, as well as Haines, looking at some lowered ceilings and visibility. That should improve a little bit tomorrow, with MVFR lingering around some of the higher terrain in southeast. IFR conditions across the eastern side of the Kenai Peninsula and western Prince William Sound, MVFR elsewhere, and IFR for the western Alaska Range passes, as well as western Alaska itself and the Brooks Range. So here's your pass conditions. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass we expect to hold at IFR for most of the daytime tomorrow. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass probably lean back over toward IFR conditions. Rainy Pass should see some improvement as the day goes on, and the same goes for Windy Pass, but turbulence will be an issue. Isabel Pass looking for VFR in the afternoon. Mentasta Pass starts at MVFR, but look for some improvements as we go. Tanita Pass also looking for some improvements with a start at MVFR, heading toward IFR in the afternoon for Portage Pass, and Chilkoot and White Pass probably looking at least some modest improvements after an IFR start tomorrow. Freezing levels has cold air still holding on to Alaska, but this is going to change. As we get into tomorrow and Friday, you'll notice a lot of that warm air is going to be lifting northward very quickly. Some of that's already making its way north of Sitka, with the freezing level aloft at 2,000 feet there. As we check on icing, notice that we'll have at least some isolated moderate across some of the northern parts of the Brooks Range and the North Slope, south central, all the way out toward the eastern Aleutians, and around the outer coast of southeast, generally from 2 to about 4,000 feet and above. And the jet stream right now has got a prime position for a moisture pump and a storm track pushing into the Gulf and keeping that resupplied. So this is our next wave coming out of the North Pacific, and we have more systems lined up here. We also have a little bit of a block slowing some of that down. So for the meantime, cold air in the west and stormy conditions in the Gulf and southeast, and some of that making its way into the interior. On that southerly flow at 9,000 feet, you can see wind speeds as strong as 60 knots out across the Gulf, across the interior 10 to 30 knots, and then our northerly flow coming down the Bering Strait into the Aleutians running at about 20 to 30 knots. For 3,000 feet, you can see southerlies are a little bit stronger, closer to southeastern Alaska and coming ashore in south central. They slow down across the interior to 10 knots, and north and easterly winds down the west coast and into the central and western chain at about 15 to as strong as 40 to 45 knots. Turbulence, we'll be watching the chain, the Aleutians, around the western Alaska Range, south central, Kodiak Island, and developing areas of risk here across southeast, generally below 6,000 feet. Across south central and southeast, and across the west below 4,000 feet. Watch for isolated areas of turbulence to develop across the interior. That's a look at your aviation report. We'll be back with the rest of your marine weather and that ice edge here in just a few minutes.
Adventure and excitement certainly describe this man. The head coach of the NFL's Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Sam Wyche. You couldn't find a busier person who still finds the time to fly.
The opportunity to fly would also be functional for me because I do a lot of banquet speaking. I go places and need to be somewhere at 5:30 in the afternoon and would still like to get back that evening and not kill all day long in an airport or in a car driving somewhere. Plus just the fun of it. It's relaxing for me.
Relaxation isn't a word you would normally associate with being a pilot. But for Sam and a lot of us, that's just what it is.
As a football coach, I'm constantly worried about what players to play, whether to go for it on fourth down, what strategy to employ, and I can get up in that plane on a Friday afternoon or a Saturday afternoon before a Sunday game and lose myself. And for an hour, finding holes in the clouds, I can forget about football because your attention has to be totally on that airplane when you're in the airplane. It is a serious business, but it's a very relaxing one.
Sam has to be pretty smart to be an NFL head coach, but you don't have to be a genius to learn to fly.
The skill is learnable by just about everybody. And the mental part of it, just like anything else, if you put the time in and do the studying that you have to do, which is more fun than study, you can learn it.
Even though Sam now owns an airplane, he started out by renting. As a matter of fact, about 2/3 of the pilot population rent when they want to fly. And renting definitely has advantages.
The nice thing about renting an airplane is you go out and you get in the airplane, you fly somewhere, and maybe you're in the air for an hour, and once you get there, you have lunch or you visit friends and you're there for 3 or 4 hours and get back in the plane and fly back. You may have had the plane all day, but you're only paying for the time that you're actually flying the airplane. So a 2-hour cost may benefit you a full day's enjoyment somewhere else.
Like most of us, learning to fly has been personally rewarding for Sam.
I enjoy getting in an airplane because it's beautiful up there. You get above the planet Earth. You can look down and see the relationships of places that you visit on the ground. You can see exactly how small you are in this big scheme of things at times. It puts a lot of things in perspective for you. But there is a freedom and there's a spirit up there that's just different. I think you'll have to get in the plane, get behind the controls and lift off, get up about 5,000 feet one time and everyone knows what you're talking about.
One person for whom aviation has become a thoroughly enjoyable part of her life is Mary Lou Bowman. Her children were in college out of town, and she wanted a way to see them without the long drive.
As I passed by a little airport near our home, I thought that would really be fun to learn to fly. And as I asked my husband about it, he encouraged me to go ahead, and I thought maybe I'm too old to start this, but it was so much of a challenge and so much fun that I continued to get my ratings and go ahead.
Mary Lou's hobby turned out to be more valuable than she first thought. Her husband, Don, a produce distributor, had designs on her newly acquired skill.
Well, I think we saw originally a need in the business. Being in the produce business, we go to a lot of out-of-the-way places, farming communities, things like that, where the product is grown and packed and so forth, and not accessible by airline, and just no way to get there very quick unless you can get into their small airports, and that was really a great benefit for us and what we were trying to do as far as the business was concerned. Take, for an example, a trip to Florida, where Florida has several different growing areas, the middle part of the state, down toward the Everglades and on into Miami and south of that. We can leave here early in the morning, visit all 3 of those, and still get back in the same day. And we couldn't do that any other way.
Beginning something new later in life may seem on the surface to be a bit daunting. Mary Lou didn't learn to fly until she had children in college. Initially, she had the same doubts you might imagine you would have in the same situation.
I started when I was 44 and really thought at the time, will I be able to do this since I'm getting a little bit older and I haven't studied? I haven't been to school in a long time. And I did all the ground school on my own, got the books and studied and passed all the writtens. And it was exciting. It was exciting to see what I could learn and what I could achieve.
While most pilots today are men, that's becoming less true all the time. Mary Lou has some advice for women contemplating aviation.
you shouldn't back off from learning to fly just because you're a woman, because it is a big thrill, and you can do it just as well or maybe better than the men.
The benefits of being a pilot is a common theme you'll hear when talking to people who have earned their wings. Just listen to Don Wyckoff, who grew up in a flying family and has been flying since he was a teenager.
Basically 300-400 miles away is a real comfortable little trip for a weekend, and that instead of taking you 8, 9, 10 hours to drive there, you can be there on a nice day in 3 or 4 hours. And instead of having the drudgery of driving those 10 hours, you can have 3 hours of your hobby en route to your weekend getaway.
Don also cherishes the camaraderie among pilots.
I think you'll find if you were just to fly from point A to airport B and land, walk out on the ramp, you'll probably strike up a conversation with someone that you've never met before, and chances are you'll never see again, but you have a common bond. It's the fact that you fly airplanes. And generally you'll find that whenever you're around another pilot, immediately the conversation strikes, so that no matter how hard your wife kicks you in the shin or anything like that, you're gonna be talking about airplanes. And it's a unique bond.
Don echoes the sentiments of not only Mary Lou and Sam, but most others who enjoy the privilege of flight.
Flying to me is an absolute bug. It's almost addicting. When the skies are clear and it's blue and you can see forever, you're not really interested in taking a ride in a car unless it's driving your car down to the airport to go fly an airplane, because the conditions are perfect and you can go out and just kind of experience the freedom, be on your own, in control of your airplane. And it isn't work, it's fun.
These folks made the decision to step out of the ordinary and learn to fly. They're the ones who will be flying, not driving for hours to take the kids to grandma's. And while other people are stuck in traffic trying to get to those great resort destinations, they'll be out of their airplanes and on their way to the beach, the ski slope, or the golf course. The trip that's an all-weekend affair for most is a day trip for these busy, productive people who want the fun but don't want the hassle. And for them, those nearby getaways are now just a long lunch. The magic of flight. It happens some 50 million times a year. And for people just like you and me, getting to know your way around this new world can be as big a challenge as flight training itself.
A quick check of your ice edge. You can always find this at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. Well, you can see the ice edge is coming up right on St. Paul. The marginal ice zone below 80% in concentration probably has a lot of ice strips in it, and that's moving from northeast to southwest. That's about 7 nautical miles away from the northeastern corner of St. Paul. The main concentration of ice is still about 25 nautical miles to the north and east, but it is creeping to the south and west. So pay attention to that, and once again, good luck with the crab and the cod and so much more. Here's a look at southeast. As you check on the winds the next couple days, they're going to be picking up southerlies from 20 to 25 on the inside, 4 to 5 foot seas across the inner channels, across the outer coast, 10-foot seas all the way up and down, southerlies around 30 knots or so coming up the outer coast for your Thursday. For Friday, higher gusts are a little bit more likely as we get through the day. Watch for 20-knot winds around Lynn Canal, 6 to 11-foot seas as you head further southward, and southerlies up the outer coast, generally around 25 to 30 knots or so. Seas there also coming up to 13 to 14 feet. So winds are going to be stronger on Friday and certainly more gusty. Easterlies inside of Prince William Sound climb to 30 knots. Storm warnings as you head out toward the Barren Island region and the Western Gulf, 45 to 50 knots there with 14 to 16-foot seas on the eastern coast of Kodiak Island as well. And stiff northeast winds coming down Cook Inlet and picking up speed as you head into Shelikof Strait. 50 knots there with a 15-foot sea and higher gusts all the way around the Gulf. For Friday, a quick reprieve. Northeasterlies coming down Cook Inlet, 25 to as strong as 40 knots west of the Barrens with 10-foot seas there, 6-foot seas improving inside of Shelikof Strait. And east and southeasterly winds in the north and western Gulf. Easterlies continue, though, inside of Prince William Sound, 30 knots with a 6-foot sea. And again, watch for some higher gusts outside of the Copper River Delta region and outside of Prince William Sound. In Bristol Bay, 35 knots from the north and east on Thursday. Freezing spray, some of that heavy at times across the Bering Sea coast and northward toward the ice edge. 40 knots there with a 15-foot sea. 15, even 16 and 17-foot seas across the Pacific coast with 50-knot winds from Castle Cape all the way down toward False Pass on Thursday. Quick reprieve again on Friday. Northwesterlies crossing the Bering Sea coast into the Pacific, 30 to 35. 11 to 16-foot seas on the southern end of the island, 9-foot seas all the way up toward Kodiak Island with a southeasterly wind at 20 knots and 9-foot seas. The strongest winds for the central and eastern chain again will be Thursday, 40 to 50 knots on the Bering Sea coast, 35 to 40 knots across the Pacific with 14 to 18-foot seas there, up to 19-foot seas from Nikolsky to Adak on the Bering Sea side. Northeasterlies a little bit lighter out across Adak to Shemya, 10 to 13-foot seas on a 25-knot northeasterly wind. Northwesterlies take charge, Adak all the way out toward Unalaska on Friday. Winds as high as 40 knots there with a 16-foot sea. Northerlies a little more likely throughout the day south of the chain, and northeasterlies diminish even more from Kiska to Attu at 15 knots. Northerlies coming down the west coast on Thursday. Northeasterlies a little stronger in the Kuskokwim Delta, and northeast winds continue around the Pribilofs. And again, that's advancing that ice edge. 10-foot seas in the open water there. 5-foot seas around St. Matthew on Friday. A little bit of a northwesterly shift here in the Kuskokwim Delta region. 25 to 30 knots there on Friday on the west coast. For the north, light winds for the Beaufort Seacoast 5 to 10. Northerlies a little stronger south of Cape Lisburn, up to 25 knots over the ice there for Friday. A little bit of improvement, but still some stronger winds in that region. Light winds across the north slope 10 to as low as 5 knots, generally from the north and northeast around Barrow and down the coast. Here's a quick recap of the weather across the interior tonight. Winter weather advisories are south of the Brooks Range to about the Yukon. Looks like up to 5 inches or more in some cases with a winter weather advisory there. Snow's winding down across south central, and rain and snow showers will continue for southeast. Wind will pick up across south central tomorrow and southwest as well as the eastern chain. Some of that will provide substantial warming and a change in the weather pattern. Rain and wind return to southeastern Alaska as we head through Friday. That's a look at your Alaska weather. You can always find more information online at weather.gov/Alaska. See you then.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.